a digital transformation journey in any organization. And you needed to build an ecosystem to drive this. And that's what we are going to be hearing from the next speakers. Building an impactful security champions program. How do we do that? And to share their knowledge, we have Tessa and Nidhi, Tessa Davis and Nidhi Mishra with us, senior solutions engineers from Sync. Correct? Cynic. Okay. Okay, Sneak. Okay. So Terra Terra helps her customers and partners to solve business problems and challenges that are presented by emerging technologies and software development practices. While Nidhi in general loves solving problems for her customers, trickier the better. That's what her byline says in LinkedIn. So over to you guys.
Thank you very much. Who's hungry? Okay, yeah, I know. We're going to make this a little bit fun and a little bit exciting to wake you up before lunch, but also we have some chocolate to give away if you participate in our quiz. So just while we're waiting for the slides to ramp up, I guess I can start talking about what we're doing today. So when we get this up, it's going to be run on Mentimeter. So get your phones out. We want you to use your phones. Sorry, I'll take the clicker. Thank you. So building a successful security champions program. And yeah, so why stay? You can get out your phones, number one. We've got prizes up for grabs, and that does include chocolate for those of you who said you were hungry. And most importantly, this conference is all about learning from our peers and from the community. So this is an opportunity. It's going to be interactive. We'll get your input, and at the end, we're going to you're going to see the best ideas from inside the room, so you will get an opportunity to learn from everyone here. Okay, so quick display of the QR code. I'll give you a second to click on that, but if you don't get the opportunity, and I move on too quickly, the instructions will be at the top of every slide. So, the rules of the competition I mentioned. We're going to pick a best answer from the audience. I'm going to be asking you a question a couple of times, and Nidhi will ask the same question. We'd ask you to sign your answers because we're not collecting your PII in the quiz, but when you write your response, sign your name at the end so we know who won. Our colleague Billy, who's sitting in the room, will be shortlisting the answers, and then at the end, you can vote on the best response. This was written before we realized the conference was running behind, so we'll probably stop looking at answers maybe 10 minutes before the end of our talk to give Billy a chance to consolidate, but we will give you a warning on that. Okay, so the question we're going to ask, and you're welcome to start putting in answers now if you like, you can submit multiple times, is when it comes to building a security champions program, what's your best idea for the first step that you could take to set one up? Or if you've already got one in place, what can be your next step to help improve it? So, first of all, why a security champions program? So I think, last year was the year that we saw DevOps become mainstream, at least in terms of people's intent. Prior to that, we'd be at these conferences and people would be talking about DevSecOps, what is it? And then now people are asking, how do we do it? So benefits that we're going to get out of it, that last session was fantastic at highlighting, I guess, the efficiency and sustainability improvements of getting security right earlier in the software development lifecycle, and the efficiency that you can gain if you don't wait until things are deployed to production to fix issues. So the idea of DevSecOps is we get faster delivery overall by getting security baked into the software development lifecycle as we go and as early as possible, as well as improving the overall resilience and reliability of your business services by making sure things are secure all the way from the start. So, the challenges with DevSecOps are often around how exactly do we get this done? There's a really great quote from Jeannie Kim, who's one of the authors of the Phoenix Project, the Unicorn Project, and one of the founding fathers of DevOps. So that a typical organization might have, to every 100 developers, maybe 10 DevOps people, but only one AppSec person. And in a lot of countries around Southeast Asia and New Zealand, where I've just flown in from as well, we'd be lucky to have even a dedicated AppSec person, because we just don't have the scale in most companies to have even 100 developers. So that ratio often trickles down to no dedicated AppSec person. But regardless, the idea of DevSecOps is we really want to empower developers and implement dev-first security, because that's the only way we're going to bake in security into our applications from the beginning. And so when people look at rolling out a DevSecOps program, a security champions program is one of the ways that in our work, Nidhi and I and all of our peers around the world, we've seen this as a very important way that organizations implement their DevSecOps program. It's not the only piece of the puzzle, but it's one of the things that's a common theme in a successful DevSecOps program. Okay, so we're going to hear from Rinky from Twitter about her definition of security champions.
Either where out of engineering or development teams, you actually identify several folks that are responsible for security. You build a scorecard that they are responsible for that development team that actually shows, here are the things that we're doing to ensure that we're securing our product in the right way or a feature in the right way.
Okay, so that quote comes from the Secure Developer podcast, which is a part of the global DevSecCon community. And there's lots of great interviews on that podcast. So takeaways from that and best practices that we've seen in our work. A security champion is, I've put here a developer, but generally speaking, you could say an engineer. It could potentially, an architect could be a security champion as well. A product owner could be a security champion, but the key point is it's not someone who you take out of an engineering role and put in a separate dedicated security champion role. There's someone that sits within the team and they remain in their current role. We like them to be self-nominated because that's where we've seen success with our clients in our experience. Just like with DevOps, when you're trying to get a groundswell of DevOps taking off at your company, self-selecting teams is a key component of that. You want to start the movement with people who are passionate about this. So the other thing is this person is not taking over AppSec's role, but they're a partner to security. So what that can often mean is security still sets the goals, objectives, company policies, but the security champion becomes the person on each squad of developers who takes joint accountability with security for the security KPIs for their team. And importantly endorsed by leadership, which we'll go into more detail on later. So, question, do you have security champions? I can see some of you have gone through the slide deck. So, do you have a formal program? Maybe you have security SMEs on your dev teams, but not a formal security champions program. Also interested to see if you've tried something like this and it hasn't been successful. Hopefully, if that's the case, you could see some best practices here today that can help. Or if you've never heard the term security champions today, I'm really interested to hear that because I did this presentation at a conference in New Zealand a year ago, and about 40% of the room said this is the first we've heard. So if this looks like that's not the case today, which is cool. That means, as an industry, we've come a long way in a year. This is starting to be a concept that people have heard about. So yeah, it looks like we've got quite a few responses there. Keep sending them in. If you haven't got to this yet, you should be able to click back and forth in the slides and answer at your own pace, because we will make this data available to the conference organisers at the end so everyone can learn from what's going on and what the feedback is from the people in this room. So, again, what is your first step or your next step to build or improve your security champions program? So make sure that you sign your name at the end, like tag, I don't know, for me I would put --Tess, because then we'll be able to identify you to give you the prize if you win. So again, this is self-paced on your phones to click through, so you can keep answering as I move the slides forward. And so I'd like to hand over to Nidhi shortly to talk about exactly how do we implement a successful Security Champions program. But first we'll ask, how important are each of these things to your DevOps journey? So executive sponsorship, fostering the right culture, setting the structure, and creating common goals. And it looks like a lot of people have already, or a few people have started answering. We'll just give you a minute to keep the responses coming in. Looks like some people are still thinking about it, not sure maybe. But yeah, we'll just give you another couple of seconds. I think we had a lot more people on the last question, so if you haven't answered yet, give us your thoughts.
So personally, we think all of these components are very critical to a DevOps journey, but we would just like to hear from you how you personally rate these components across. So I see all of them are equally prioritized, which again stands pretty much at par with what we've been thinking. Okay, we have fostering the right culture, leading ahead. Okay, culture change, yes, truly a big component of creating a right DevOps culture, DevOps practice in an organization. Okay, perfect. I think we have sufficient answers in there. You can always come back and put in your answers here. But what we want to focus on is just the way some of these components are important in developing a right DevOps culture or a practice in an organization and are critical to a DevOps journey. The same components apply equally to a DevSecOps journey as well. And we'll see them along the process. We'll talk more about all these and how they map to creating a successful DevSecOps program and creating a successful Security Champions program in an organization. Okay, perfect. So we did hear about what a Security Champions program is, and also a lot of you also talked about this is a program you're pretty much familiar with, you have something on the same lines in an organization. But what we are here to share is basically learnings from the customers that we talk to and other leading industry practitioners we talk to, and hear from them what has worked from their experience, what they think have been the fundamental concepts that have led them to create a successful champions program. So one of the leading components there is executive sponsorship. Again, it's pretty much a core tenet in there. So before I talk about this, I would also...
We got buy-in from the top. I had Dave Tichiria, our CEO, announce at one of our all-hands meetings that we were restarting the Security Champions program. And he was encouraging people. Again, they're volunteers and they had to have their supervisor's permission to join.
So we just heard from Lena Smart at MongoDB about her experience with Security Champions program. So actually they did run this program not once but twice in their organization. So the first attempt they had at running the program was right before COVID, and unfortunately the attempt was not as successful. So they did do another attempt right after. And the thing that they changed from first attempt to second attempt, which made the second attempt successful, was getting the right executive sponsorship in place. And they had a buy-in right from the CEO in this particular practice. So when it comes to executive sponsorship, priority of the leadership is a top priority in this particular program. And only once the leaders prioritize this well, only then the same priority can flow down to the other teams as well. So when I talk about priority, again, the priority has to resonate in multiple aspects. It needs to resonate in terms of the right communication that flows through the teams. It needs to communicate in terms of the right kind of resources being provided to the Security Champions program and also to the developers. And on the same things, again, if an initiative like a Security Champions program has been prioritized by the leadership, it should be adequately budgeted for. And when we mean budgeted for, the budgeting comes in different respects. One of them comes in terms of allocating the resources, in terms of time resources for the Security Champions. So what we've figured out is for all the successful security champion programs have had at least 10 to 20% of the champions' time blocked and dedicated to this program itself. And this time again can vary from like an hour per day to half a day in the sprint cycle. And this time can be used for things like doing security trainings, building the right kind of relationships with the security team, sitting with security team, understanding the problems, proper cadence calls, appropriate training in process, fostering the right culture in the developers team, and also educating them about the security process. And while all of this in place, it's important to add a right meaning to this particular program, also to give the right kind of validation to our champions who are running this program. Again, the validation can come in different forms and can come across in different forms. One of them can be the right kind of recognition that's given to our security champions by the leaders. Again, it can be in terms of the career advancement options. It can be in terms of the acknowledgement of the work they do, or it can be something in terms of, just giving them the right kind of resources, kind of enrolling them from some external trainings, etc. as well.
Before we move on from executive sponsorship, we actually had a really good conversation yesterday when we were prepping for this and phrased it in a way that I'd never thought of before, which is like, who needs to be that executive sponsor? And between us, we decided that like, if we look at our own organisation, who would we as customer-facing champions need to go to in engineering to get them to change their feature plan to get a product in for a customer? Because we work on the front line with customers every day. So let's say I'm working with a big global bank in Singapore and they need a particular feature and they need it fast. Who in engineering would I go to as a customer-facing engineer to say, hey, this big bank needs this feature in order for us to work with them? The lowest level person that can make that decision and tell the product team to drop everything and deliver this feature, that's the person you need executive sponsorship from for a security champions program. Because otherwise, that's the person that's going to tell the developers, drop everything, including this security work, and deliver this feature. And unfortunately, the reality is that that kind of fire drill happens so often when you're delivering software that there's always a reason to drop everything for feature work if we don't prioritize this kind of time set aside for essentially technical debt or prevention of technical debt. And if you look at it from that perspective, prioritizing security as part of every sprint for security champions is just the same as prioritizing the burn down or prevention of technical debt in other parts of a DevOps practice.
Sure. So Tess did raise an important time in terms of time budgeting as well. So often what we see is, in fact, it happens to us as well, right? So which is in terms of getting pulled into different other things that come across as a priority for that period of time. And also, since we talked about this, security champion typically comes from the engineering team or the development team. So we need to make sure that the time that's been accounted, like the 10-20% which we talked about, does get the right sense of priority every single week or every single sprint cycle and is not utilized for other day-to-day activities.
It's meeting people where they are and trying.
Okay, so before that, the second core tenet of running a successful security champions program would be fostering the right culture. So as much as culture change is required in bridging the gap between the dev and operations team in a DevOps kind of environment, this similar sort of culture change is also required when we're talking about running a DevSecOps program or just creating a program like Security Champions program. So before we go into it, so let's hear from Andy what he has to say about it.
It's meeting people where they are and trying to integrate with existing. It's meeting people where they are and trying to integrate with existing workflows of how people do their job, making things easy and safe by default so that security isn't everybody's default job all day long.
So Annie does bring up an interesting point that it has to be easy and safe by default. So again, security, we need to foster a culture where security becomes a default. Again, you're not taking away a lot from their day-to-day activities rather than baking it into what they do what they do typically day in and out. So first thing, again, we need to create a learning culture. We need to aim for continuous improvement. And when I say learning culture, again, we need to eliminate the concept of blaming in terms of like creating security vulnerabilities. So that's a culture we need to foster. So even if developers do introduce some kind of vulnerabilities in the code, again, we need to create a culture where they are able to own up to their mistakes, where they invest in fixing the security vulnerabilities, where if there's any security issue, they feel free to talk openly about it. And we are trying to improve the process or improve the security posture over a period of time. Second thing, again, it has what the program in terms of security we are creating as part of Security Champions program, it has to be very dev first. Again, the trainings that we talk about, again, they have to be aimed at developers. The goals of the training, again, must align very closely with what developers do day in and out. Some of the good examples, what we've seen is in terms of creating the right kind of training, and this came from one of the customers. So rather than creating a training around, let's say a common attack, like, let's say a cross-site scripting attack or directory traversal attack, what they in fact did is they picked up how these tie back to their existing applications, picked up an example of how this was affecting their application, demonstrated the impact of this vulnerability, how this particular vulnerability could be exploited, and then that was basically a baseline for them to create a training around that. And developers also resonated very well to it because they could actually see how that impacted their code, how they were knowingly or unknowingly introducing these kind of vulnerabilities, and that are kind of harmful for the application as such, right? So in terms of this, what we are basically trying to do, talk about is, again, developers also want to create secure code. So what we need to empower them is by the means of creating secure code, and that's where Security Champion also comes into the picture. So we've seen it comes out very helpful when the security team becomes like a go-to person for developers. So when the security team has kind of an open door policy where the developers can go and talk to security team about any security concerns, about how to fix it, or how a vulnerability affects their environment as well. And last of all, it has to be a culture where they see things being rewarded. Again, it needs to come in different aspects. It could be basically something as simple as gamification among the development team, where we could also have some structure around, fixing vulnerabilities, or, just kind of rewarding the people who focus on the program.
Yes, and it's really interesting what Nidhi was saying about like gamification, capture the flags and that kind of thing. What we've found is those work so well for the general dev population, but security champions tend to respond better and engage with the program for the long term when we add extras that are career building. So for our security champions, we usually encourage the program owners to include things like additional training sponsored by the company, things like certifications sponsored by the company, and being open to the path that, if they've invested the time and done well as security champions, that this is a way to receive, recognition and reward in terms of like a pay rise, a promotion, extra responsibilities as a senior dev. Because, the people who self-nominate as security champions are often the people who are really passionate about the quality of their work as developers anyway, and that tends to resonate well and complement what we do in terms of gamification, free swag, lunch vouchers, capture the flag events for the devs as a whole.
Sure. So now we come back to the same question. So what is your first step in building a Security Champions program, or if you already have one, what do you think would be your next step towards building a successful Security Champions program? So this would be the right time to punch in your answers.
Yes, and please also remember to sign your response, because our colleague Billy over there is shortlisting responses, and we'll prioritise getting the finalists to be people who've identified themselves so we can find the right person for the prizes. So we'll also tie the books to this question that we hand out at the end of the session, but there's also chocolate up for grabs.
So key in your names, Twitter handles, LinkedIn profiles, whatever makes you identifiable.
Yeah. And again, you can come back to this slide once we move forward.
Sure. So what we would be doing is, again, originally it was planned at 12:25, but what we would do is maybe in like 10 minutes from now, or maybe 5 minutes from now. So that's when we'll put a cutoff on answering this particular question. Again, this is a question we ask multiple times during our presentation, so you can punch in your answers more than once. So I'll hand it back to Tess now to take us through like the further components, the
Yes.
further tenets of Security Champions program.
Thank you. Thanks, Nidhi. So hopefully a lot of those, concepts around executive sponsorship and culture, there's a lot of common themes there from DevOps transformation in general. So a lot of people then come to, but exactly how do I do this? What does the structure look like? And what KPIs and metrics do we need? So let's dive a little bit deeper into that. And of course, every organization is different, but having worked with thousands of customers around the world and having access to these great resources from the community, interviews about what's worked, there are common themes even in terms of structure, goals, KPIs. So Brendan from Toast had some really good ideas. This is one of my favorite podcasts from the Secure Developer. So let's listen to him. Oh, sorry. Let's listen to him now. Thank you.
We've really focused on building a security program that is sufficiently documented, that provides all of the tools and technologies that our developers need to be successful, and then provide our engineers with guidance on what it means to be successful in the program.
So you can see from that, like the absolute heart of that is empowering developers. The program is about getting the tools and processes into the hands of the developers so that they take ownership of the security of their own code. So again, I alluded to this at the beginning, but security champions must sit in engineering. Again, architects, fine. Product owners, fine. But what you don't want is to pull those people out and put them in dedicated roles. That doesn't bring the scale that we're looking for in a security champions program. So there does need to be somebody to run the program. And again, as I mentioned at the start, in Southeast Asia, just like where I come from in New Zealand, there's often the challenge where we don't have 100 developers, therefore very unlikely to have one AppSec person. So it might not be an AppSec person that runs the program. We have some very enthusiastic clients who start a groundswell of DevSecOps and security champions programs from within the DevOps community because they're looking at how to make that step to DevSecOps. So, but you do generally need someone who then becomes the go-to person for the security champions to enable them, empower them, plan the training, liaise with them on what the KPIs and goals are for the security on their team so that those security champions can then take that ownership. We do also need to set the boundaries because you don't want then security champions thinking that they know best and sort of overriding the company policies on what is secure and what's not secure and saying, hey, I'm a security champion, I can make this call to override that on my own without having had, I guess, the endorsement from security to plan and define the guardrails. We do want to empower them to make the decisions on their own when it comes to what they're going to push out, but not necessarily defining what the company's policies are going to be around security without consultation with whoever that program management person is, who then becomes responsible for, those guardrails. And then this last point is an interesting one because we've had successful security champions programs within our clients who do either way, either getting security champions who are champions for life and keeping them in as long as they're still committed. And we have other customers who purposely rotate the program because if you're providing benefits like additional training, free certification, maybe other benefits like dedicated time off to invest in their own self-paced learning on security, they want to provide that benefit to the team and spread around the career development. So this is one that I think we're less opinionated on because we've seen customers make it work either way. Hopefully you have enough groundswell of people self-selecting into the program that you would have the benefit of being able to rotate them through. That's the goal. And then structure actually comes, quite nicely around to goals and metrics. So if you're setting up a security champions program or a DevSecOps program in general, how you measure success can actually influence behavior just like anything in DevOps. So, when you are planning a DevOps program, we know we basically need to measure and then iterate and then measure again, because it's all about continuous improvement and learning and improving our software delivery practices. So exactly the same thing for Security Champions program as part of a broader DevSecOps initiative. So again, Brendan, love this podcast. Had some really good thoughts on how to structure those KPIs and metrics for the optimal outcome. Thanks.
The most important thing that I have found in my time is not to measure security as an objective, we are secure, we are not secure, but to measure security in terms of progress. So, and it depends on what you're looking at. So I'm going to take the Security Champions program just as an example since we're on the topic. So when I measure the success of a program, I'm not necessarily measuring the security, I'm measuring that actual individual program's outcome.
Yeah, so I love everything he had to say there. And I'm sure, if you've been working in the DevOps movement for a while, a lot of that would resonate with you. Like, it's not about absolutes, it's about continuous improvement and learning over time. So something else that he said that I'll actually jump to now is measuring the success of the program as your continuous improvement initiative, because that's more reflective of what people are actually doing rather than, making people accountable for what might have happened in the past on the day you maybe drop a tool in to measure how many vulnerabilities are in your existing apps. And so, yes, it's important to get the right tools in place to get data on how many vulnerabilities you have and what risks those present across different applications and different business services. But it's equally as important to goal the team on KPIs and metrics that drive improvement. And depending on the maturity of your Security Champions program, that might start out as goals around reducing the number of new vulnerabilities that are introduced within a given sprint. And as you mature and you start to see those new vulnerabilities drop, you might switch to more of a focus on burning down the backlog of existing issues and give your Security Champions KPIs around, how many existing vulnerabilities they can remediate with a given sprint. So I think, again, really important point that's right at the top, but I'm going to circle back to it to close because I think it's most important. There's always this question around of when we talk to security people often, but are devs really going to get on board with this? In our experience, most devs want to do the right thing. Historically, it's just been too hard because we put scanners in far right in deployment or best case just as we're building, and they're flooded with alerts about things that they have to go back and spend a lot of time fixing instead of doing feature work. But if we reposition security as a product quality, non-functional requirement, along with resilience, performance, stability of the platform, security is another core non-functional requirement. So devs, if they see it that way, will actually be very enthusiastic because improving security becomes a part of being a better developer. So with that, we've given a bit of time since the last time we asked the question to put in your responses to what do you think your first step in starting a Security Champions program might be, or if you've already got one in place, what's your next step to improve it? So on the next slide, Billy's ready to go. We're going to ask you to vote on the best responses, and the books will go to the top 2 answers, and we've got chocolate for all 4 of the shortlist. So, Nidhi, did you want to read through this?
Sure. So these are some of the good ideas you've come across, and we've voted them on like this scale. So the first one comes from Ella, which is about, okay, it's changing dynamically. Okay. So the first one we have is from Asankhya. Okay. I hope I pronounced your name right. So which is around identifying developers/individuals within the organization who have interest in security and are looking to work together to improve security process. So really good one there. Another interesting idea comes in terms of collaboratively coming up with security KPIs as a team, all with the ownership in outcome of meeting security goals within all DevOps. So that was another good one coming from Ella. We have John Tan saying that we should be sending the team to a conference like this and look forward to enthusiastic volunteers. For sure helps. Okay, we have from Michael, I don't know how to pronounce that, sorry if I'm pronouncing it wrong. So again, tooling needs to be easy. Again, a really good and important one. That's something we talk about day in and out, and also with appropriate guardrails in process. The 5th one there is with, it says that the first step has to be getting security right at the beginning of life cycle, means getting the right people involved who have experience at the drama end. Okay.
Yep, cool. So these are all great ideas. I'm sure, based on last time we did this, there were so many great responses that didn't make it to the shortlist. So you will get to see all of those when we share the pack at the end. So you can learn from your peers about what their great ideas are as well, which is the whole point of this session. Who was it in the end? Asakanha. Shall we do the book now? And then Ella for the books. Yeah. Thank you. Oh, yes, of course. Thank you. And thank you everybody for participating. I think we've created some really good IP. So there's also, don't have time to go through them now, but we've also put some resources in the slide pack which we'll send out. And these are great community resources that can help you learn more about Security Champions program. But I also want to acknowledge that when preparing this session, we did take some great inspiration from all of these places, including, of course, the podcast. So our final message is...
Go fast, be safe.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
We have something for you for being the awesome presenters here. So Archana, my friend, a small token of appreciation from the organizers. Thank you, Niladri and team. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Oh, my God. Thank you. This is